Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Behind the Lines podcast, part of the Lines Podcast Network. My name is Stephen Andress, joined each and every week on this show during the NFL season by Christian Cipollini, sports trader at BetMGM. But we thought we'd come on one more time here after the Super Bowl, recap how that Chiefs and Eagles game looked from the sportsbook point of view, and also look at some of the really early action over at BetMGM for the Super Bowl futures next year, as well as NFL MVP. And we'll also get a look at where the handle is to be the number one pick in the NFL draft, with the Combine still coming up here very quickly. Only 2 weeks after the Super Bowl is when they hold the Combine in Indianapolis. So first of all, Christian, how are you? I am hoping that you are over your Eagles grief at this point.
I'd say no. I thought I would be by now, but no, we're still mourning.
Yeah, it was a tough one for sure. I have a lot of family in the Philadelphia area, as you know, and I'm sure some of our listeners know from following along. So, yeah, it was a tough one down to the wire there. But what about from the sportsbook point of view, man? How was it for the company?
For the company, yeah, that's a much different story from mine. Yeah, but there's a lot of work that goes in the Super Bowl. We posted close to 1,000 markets, I think 800 something markets.
Wow.
Ton of work that goes in all throughout, and it was a lot of work for very, very, very little reward. I think we won it less than 1%, barely made anything on that. So just all that work for just what normally happens on a regular college basketball game, essentially. The Eagles losing definitely helped us. That was, if it wasn't for that, it would have been a disaster. The Chiefs winning was the outcome we needed, but all those points, all those touchdowns, the big names were scoring touchdowns. That's pretty much as bad as it could go. So kind of, you name a prop, it probably hit. So yeah, that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, well, except for me, who bet on Miles Sanders and got injured on his first touch of the game. But other than that, it seems like, this has been a common thread throughout the NFL season when we talk about some of these big headline games, primetime games. High scoring is generally not good for the book, it seems.
Yeah, for most of the time, yeah. A game like that is, for the most part, not going. The props and the player props and all that, they're tend to be more overs than unders. So when there's a lot of points, it's bad for the book, especially touchdown scores in a game like that where it was all the big names. There was no third string tight end scoring, no surprise guy scoring. It was Travis Kelce, it was AJ Brown, it was those guys. So when that happens, Jalen Hurts, it's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. So that's kind of the view from the book for Super Bowl 57, but Super Bowl 58 futures are already up, as most of you that bet the NFL well know. At BetMGM, if we take a look today, the Chiefs are the favorite yet again at plus 550. Then you have the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers tied for the second choice at 9-1. The Eagles are at 10-1. And Christian, I want to make sure I'm seeing this right. You have the Bengals at shorter than 10-1 right now. So my board got a little out of whack here. I'm sorry. But yeah, the Bengals are actually the second choice here ahead of the Bills and the 49ers, right? Is that a product of the Ohio sports betting launch and you guys getting some handle from the state of Ohio?
Yeah, and just kind of a combo of how they looked. They had a couple problems, but they still looked like a team that can certainly win a title. Joe Burrow's very legit, and we know we'll be taking a lot of bets on him. I would say for the most part, those 5 teams you just listed, that's like the tier 1. Mm-hmm. And there's not a huge difference, I guess, in winning percentage between them at the moment, at least looking forward onto the season.
So to make sure I got it in the right order for everybody, Chiefs, Bengals, then Bills and Niners tied for the third choice, followed by the Eagles. All those teams are 10-1 or shorter. And then, as you mentioned, Christian, a teardrop down to the Cowboys at 16-1, the Ravens at 18-1, the Chargers at 20-1. And then you have teams like the Jaguars, the Lions, who have my interest, maybe not at this price quite yet, but the New York Jets, 25-1. And then we get into teams like the Packers with the Aaron Rodgers mystery, Miami Dolphins, LA Rams, who we know won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, at 30-1, everybody else 40-1 or longer. So my question to you, sir, is what teams are getting the most handle at this early stage of the offseason?
So I'll take out that first tier that we just talked about, those 5 teams. Those 5 teams have taken well over half of the handle that we have so far.
Hmm.
So I'll try to talk more onto these long shots. And the first one that I'll mention is the team that you mentioned, the Detroit Lions.
Hmm.
Outside of those first 5, they have the most bets, most tickets placed on them so far. We do have a pretty good presence in Michigan, so that'll lead to it. But it's also probably the way they played. Has some people that want to take a stab at them.
For sure. If they made the playoffs, I was making the argument that they were potentially the second or third best team in the NFC, probably third behind the 49ers and the Eagles. That's how good that offense looked. They have continuity this offseason with head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterback all returning. They add a first-round wide receiver coming off the ACL who played a little bit last year in Jamison Williams, but he'll be in the mix now with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So if they can beef up this defense a little bit and you have Aaron Rodgers potentially leaving the division, the path to the playoffs becomes a lot more clear to them. The only question I have now, Christian, is if the price is too short for me to bet them at 25-1. And this is a number that was 30-1 or higher when you guys opened, I'm sure.
Actually, they weren't too much more. Yeah, about 30-1. But if you look at the NFC, it's really weak at this point.
Mm-hmm.
There's not very good quarterback play to the point where you could make a solid case that Jared Goff is the third best quarterback. I mean, take out, Aaron Rodgers. We don't know what's going to happen with him. You can make a solid argument that he's certainly a top 5 quarterback in the NFC, and that offense was humming. So I think that's kind of where that price is shaping up. All of the good quarterbacks right now are in the AFC.
I think what you and I probably agree on is that if you're going to take a shot on a long shot for Super Bowl futures, then you really should be looking at the NFC because the path in the AFC is just going to be a murderer's row for the foreseeable future with quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow at the top of that conference and upstarts like Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence trying to break through as well. So you're not really going to get a great price on Herbert or Trevor Lawrence. You're going to get the same price as one of these NFC teams. And you don't have to go through those top 3 quarterbacks in the AFC that for these NFC teams. So, that's kind of where I'm at. And that division that the Lions are in is where I'm kind of interested right now, Christian. We talked about the Lions and the price has shortened a bit, but I mean, who's to say that the Vikings, with adding Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator, obviously, a lot of us, including me, were harping about how overrated the Vikings were. The point differential was historically low for a team that had that many wins. But they add Brian Flores, who we know has done a really good job of scheming defense and improving defenses. Not sure I really want to back Kirk Cousins in the playoffs still, to be honest with you. So maybe it's a division bet. But it's interesting to me that the lack of confidence in the Vikings has gotten to the point now where they are 40-1 to win the Super Bowl and the Lions are 25-1. Imagine saying that sentence this time last year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially at this point, towards the end of the season, or Vikings were 11 and whatever, and the Lions started out with a terrible losing record and turned it all around. But I think that does stem to where this price point is and why the Vikings are at 41. I think it's just still people don't think the Vikings will win. Like, maybe they'll have a good enough season, but it's just not worth it. So I think that tends to be why they're at a lower price point where people can look at the Lions and say, no, I think they can really make a run.
Yeah.
Explains the bets. Yeah.
The last question I have for you about future Super Bowl futures, then we'll move on to MVP. The Green Bay Packers. We talk a lot during the season when there's a quarterback injury that you guys sometimes in the early part of the week set a spread that's basically in the middle of where it'll be if the quarterback plays or if he doesn't play. I look at this Packers number at 30-1, and I can't help but ask myself, is this a number that's in the middle? That it's going to be a lot shorter if Rodgers is back and a lot longer if it's Jordan Love. What is this number?
This number is more so that the trend is looking like Aaron is not going to be playing. So I'd say more so in the middle, but skewed more to Jordan Love's going to be the quarterback of this team, is where this is sitting right now. All indications lead to believe that he probably won't be coming back. If he does, and if you think he does, you got a great number on them at 30-1. But most likely, it's looking like Jordan Love. That's where the price is.
If these are what the prices are going to be, the Super Bowl futures right now, if you look at this division, Lions 25-1, Packers 30-1, Vikings 40-1. If we see a similar order in the NFC North division futures, I'm probably going to bet on the Vikings to win this division as the third choice in the odds. I think that's probably where the value is. Doesn't mean I think they're going to have success in the postseason, but I think that would be a pretty good number if we're getting the third choice in those odds on the Vikings with the improvement in coaching that we got with their defensive coordinator. And we already know the offense, even if we have doubts about the ceiling of Kirk Cousins, did enough to score a lot of points and win games last year. So that's kind of how I feel about that division. Let's move on to NFL MVP here, Christian. And, I think a lot of people in the sports betting space like to look at some running backs or wide receivers at triple-digit numbers here. But for the most part, this is a quarterback award. The quarterback wins this award basically every single time. So, the usual suspects are at the top here. The favorites, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. We just talked about how hard the AFC is going to be to get through. And here's your perfect indication why. The top 5 favorites are all the AFC quarterbacks. So there's your evidence that you should probably be looking to an NFC long shot for the Super Bowl. But outside of those top 5, first of all, are those 5 getting most of your early handle, like the top favorites were in the Super Bowl market as well?
Not as much to that degree. Mahomes, Burrow, and Hurts have the top of our number, but so far Allen and Herbert so far haven't taken nearly as much action.
Okay. So where do you think, most of, I guess, where's the notable action coming in from? Because I know in past years when we see, early liability from what you guys show us and send out to all of your affiliates, it's usually a quarterback down the board at a juicy number that potentially a breakout candidate that's getting some of the early love from professional bettors out there. Is there anything similar to that this year that you guys are seeing?
Yeah, but I'll say the price is starting to kind of come around on realizing that a lot of the moves that people tend to make this early is a quarterback in their second or third year that's kind of expected to make a big jump. So the one that fits the bill here is Justin Fields, who, especially towards the end of the year, was putting up, those crazy runs. It didn't look like he was really the problem on that team. And then getting this first overall pick, which maybe they trade, but the idea is that their team should be improved. He probably runs around and maybe looks a lot better. So Fields is a spot there. Another one is Trey Lance at 50-1, and then even a little bit on Russell Wilson with the Broncos at 50-1.
I can't bet Russell Wilson. I know Sean Payton is there, but I mean, with the other quarterbacks in that conference, is the ceiling really there for him to lead the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns like Patrick Mahomes did? That's the kind of ceiling we need to look for from a passing perspective if they're not a rushing quarterback. And then if they are a rushing quarterback, then we can get some of those outlier seasons like we saw with Jalen Hurts almost last year, or Lamar Jackson winning it a couple of years ago where he rushed for more than 1,000 yards. So just to kind of put a bow on this for everybody, the MVP odds right now from top to bottom over at BetMGM, Burrow, Mahomes, and Allen are all tied to be in favorite status at plus 650. Justin Herbert is at plus 900. Jalen Hurts and Tua are 10-1 each. Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott are 14-1. Lamar Jackson is 16-1, despite us not being sure he's going to be on the Ravens next year. Aaron Rodgers and Brock Purdy 25-1. My God, please, people, do not bet Brock Purdy at 25-1. We don't even know if he's going to be playing week 1.
Yeah.
Geno Smith 25-1, Justin Fields 25-1 now. So let me ask you, Christian, do you know, like, how much has that number moved on Justin Fields for him to be 25-1 now? I feel like I remember him being a lot longer when these odds opened up.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number, but I want to say he was around 50-1 to start, and then bet in pretty quick. He is already one of our top. He's top 3 in handle so far of players. So
the other name I want to ask you about here is Jordan Love, because our lead writer Mo Nawara pointed out that if Aaron Rodgers is going to be gone, then Jordan Love on a good team and a well-coached roster might be kind of that breakout candidate to have an outlier season, because we just simply don't know if he is capable of doing that yet. In a similar way that we didn't know about Jalen Hurts. So pretty quiet on the Jordan Love front in terms of handle for you guys, or are you seeing a little bit there?
It is actually pretty quiet, but I do see that angle there at least. He's trained under Aaron Rodgers, and so far in the past 30 something years they've had 2 quarterbacks, so they have a good system down to potentially make it a third. So if you believe in that, he's definitely a good price there at 50-1.
So, and again, just to drive the point home for everybody, it's been a long time since a non-quarterback has won this award. I'm just checking the history here, and you have to go all the way back to 2012 when Adrian Peterson won NFL MVP. Since then, every year, it's been a quarterback. So you truly need some type of perfect storm to happen. And in this era of passing and dual threat quarterbacks, good luck betting on any of these triple-digit shots to win MVP. Obviously not a 0% chance, but minuscule chances there. And these quarterbacks are, that's why you see the board, I'm sure, Christian, and you're not going to get a triple digit number on a quarterback in this era.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially with the way that Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow play, it's going to be so hard for a skill position player just to come up and win that award. It's going to take all 3 of those players, and then you're still talking about Herbert, Hurts, Lawrence, all these other guys to have not as good seasons as this skill position player. It's just very, very hard to have.
Yeah, I have not bet into this market yet. I bet into it last year during the NFL draft. Sadly, had a Jalen Hurts ticket at like 45-1. But that time period, I think, is when I would tell people to start tuning in, start trying to see if a team acquires a big-time wide receiver to help their quarterback that is going to raise that quarterback ceiling, and his numbers are low. We know Justin Fields is the huge dual threat capability on the ground. We didn't see much from him passing, but they also had a really bad wide receiving core. If they go out and make a splash move for a big-time wide receiver, that could only increase his ceiling next year in a very winnable division. So just one example that you guys should be looking out for. See what teams add a big weapon to help their quarterback. It almost worked for Jalen Hurts last year. If he didn't get hurt, he might have beaten out Patrick Mahomes if he went out and put together a 16-1, 17-1 season with the playoffs included. So, any final thoughts here on MVP before we move on to number 1 pick, Christian?
I was just going to touch on that with Fields and the fact that they have that number 1 pick. That probably also speaks to him, taking that action and moving down the board. They end up trading whoever they end up trading with. Maybe you'd have to imagine wide receiver is going to be one of the spots that the Bears are definitely going to try to improve to try to see what they have in Justin Fields. So,
yeah, they also have $100 million in cap space for free agency. Yep. So, it could be a trade. It could be a trade and a contract extension. Don't be surprised if, just as an example, they go out and sign some big time wide receiver and also draft like a Jackson Smith and Jigma. Then we're talking about a totally different situation for Justin Fields and his ceiling in 2023. Okay, number 1 pick in the NFL draft, Christian, as the NFL Combine is approaching here. And obviously we have a long way to go until the NFL draft starts. And this market was bananas last year. It was bouncing around all over the place. We get closer and closer to the draft, and Aiden Hutchinson is not the huge, heavy favorite that he should have been. We find out Trayvon Walker is the apple of the Jacksonville Jaguars' eye. So take all this with a grain of salt, right? First of all, before you tell us a little bit about the handle, I assume at this point in the calendar, the limits are a lot lower for NFL draft stuff here because you're dealing with information and not necessarily on-field results.
Yeah, I mean, in general, our draft markets are going to be a lot lower limits. It stems from the fact that the information gets provided equally at this point. When you know when Rappaport puts out a tweet, you get the notification at the same time that we do. So, uh, you know, we try to be on top of that as fast as we can. But if they do say, the Bears are drafting Will Anderson or whatever they're doing, if that notification pops up, we're getting it at the same time. So we do try to keep those low. And a lot of times it is rumors that are talked around, especially once this combine starts, all the GMs and owners start getting together. And sometimes there's rumors that some people get a hand of that we don't necessarily know. So those limits are typically low.
So for most of the time this market has been open over the past few months, it has been the Alabama quarterback Bryce Young that has been favored over the field. And that is with the assumption, obviously, that the Bears keep Justin Fields and trade the number 1 pick at this point. So Bryce Young right now, if you're going to bet him, you're going to have to bet more than $100 to get $100 in profit. What have you seen in terms of the handle here over the course of this market being open for you guys? And I guess, has it changed at all recently since the end of the season?
So when it did change was when that last game of the season, when the Bears ended up losing and the Texans ended up winning in that last week. There was a slight change at that point because suddenly a quarterback wasn't available, but has shifted a little bit back because the expectation is that the Bears aren't going to be making that pick. There's a bunch of teams that want a quarterback, so you'd imagine that someone is going to jump up there and get it. But so far, Bryce Young does have a majority of the handle for first overall pick. I'm a bit surprised, actually. We have very little money on CJ Stroud, but Will Levis has been taking some action. Maybe it's just seeing value in that price point versus where Stroud is. And then, believe it or not, Anthony Richardson has moved from 100 to 1 to 25 to 1. We've seen some action there, which is a bit surprising.
Taking a long shot, I guess. Full disclosure, I bet Will Levis, I guess sometime in the second half of the NFL season at 15 to 1. And the first thing I will tell anybody that asks me about betting on the NFL draft is that you should immediately lock your own personal opinion about these players in the closet and throw away the key. It does not matter how good you think Will Levis is or Bryce Young is or CJ Stroud. This is just trying to get ahead of information. As Christian said, the books have no big advantage here. That's why they keep the limits lower, because it's a race to information when these things happen. So when Mel Kiper comes out, who's been doing this for decades, and says he has Will Levis as his number 1 quarterback on the board, he's not doing that because he's just watching his own tape and coming up with his own decision. Mel Kiper's talking to scouts, talking to front office personnel. There's enough people, I think, at least in NFL circles, that see Will Levis's tools and believe in his ceiling. Now, a lot of people on NFL Draft Twitter hate his floor and will criticize him for that. But I don't think what he did at Kentucky last year matters all that much to whether or not he's going to be the number 1 pick. It's a completely different evaluation process now at this point. I do agree with you, Christian, that it's interesting that CJ Stroud hasn't gotten a ton of money because of, just in my opinion, the knock on him was what we saw with knock of past Ohio State quarterbacks, that they have unbelievable wide receivers, that he doesn't have to do much. Well, then he played Georgia in the semifinal and almost carried them single-handedly to the national championship against the best defense in the country in Georgia. And I think that has put CJ Stroud on the radar of a few other NFL teams here. So I'm not sure I agree with Bryce Young being favored over the field at this point, but handle has dictated that for you guys at BetMGM. But I also think that if you are saying you're completely sure about one of these 3 quarterbacks being the number 1 pick, you're crazy at this point. So
yeah,
I don't know how you feel about the market, Christian, but it seems like it's still a complete mystery to me at this point.
Yeah, it's 100% a mystery, and we're going to learn a lot more information in this next few weeks coming up, because the Colts may say CJ Stroud is their guy, and the Texans might say Bryce Young is their guy, and the Raiders might say Will Levis is their guy, and it's all then at that point going to depend on who trades with the Bears. So there's a lot of different things that could happen. Bryce Young could be the guy for sure that most people want to take at number one, but then a different team jumps up and trades with the Bears and he ends up going. So I would say it's more so on the information of what team likes what player more and how they'll get there.
And it's also in the realm of possibility, Christian, here. I agree with you. The assumption is the Bears trade the pick. But in the scenario you just laid out, where each team likes a different quarterback, there's no motivation to trade up. So now the Bears have to convince one of these teams that two teams like the same quarterback. You have to play that kind of game where the Bears traded up exactly one spot to get Mitchell Trubisky with the Niners, and the Niners had no other trade partner to worry about to try and pull that off. So, it becomes a kind of a game of chess here and a game of, politics and trying to figure out and convince teams that they need to make this move. So it's still in the realm of possibility the Bears don't find a trade partner here. And each of these teams are very happy with whoever quarterback falls to them. So to that point, Christian, do you have the odds in front of you for number one pick before we wrap up here?
I do. Bryce Young is -120.
And can you just kind of go down the board until we get through those three quarterbacks and the top two defensive players as well?
CJ Stroud, second favorite at +275. Then we have Jalen Carter, third favorite at +600. Will Anderson is the same at +600. And then we get, after that, the two other quarterbacks expected to go in the first round, Will Levis at +750, and then now Anthony Richardson at +2500.
So if the Bears don't trade that pick, you're getting amazing prices on those two defensive players, and you can bet them both if you want. We don't know if they're definitely going to trade the pick, and if they ultimately do not trade the pick, those players are going to be shorter than 2-1 for that number one pick.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at right now. The odds are under the assumption that the Bears trade the pick, but they haven't yet. Keep that under consideration, and we'll see what happens here in the months to come. So, Christian, I think, if it's all good with you, we'll check in with you sporadically throughout the offseason, maybe talk some NBA futures, talk some MLB futures as well, and just catch up with you, see what the view is from the book over at BetMGM.
Of course, that'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you, as always. Fantastic insight. For the rest of you out there, throughout the off season here, we'll be having some more NFL draft podcasts. Eli Hershkovich is ramping up his college basketball coverage ahead of March Madness. Matt Brown and I will be doing some more golf podcasts as well to go with John Hasselbauer's podcasting as well. We'll have a mega pod for the players in each of the golf majors, so stay tuned for that. And of course, we'll continue to check in with Christian to see what the handle is, what the data is over at BetMGM. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoyed it. Happy off season.